Hello, everyone. How are you doing? And welcome to another episode of the Dr. Will Show, where I interview educators and entrepreneurs on leveling up. Each episode, I zoom in someone who's dope, and I just, we sit back. We have a conversation on what it means to live your best life. Now, today, I am here with Dr. Enilda Romero-Hall. Now, we will be talking about online learning. Some call it e-learning or distance learning. But it's one of those areas where, in terms of when I talk about going digital and what I want my area of specialty to be, e-learning is part of that focus. And what I love about it is that it is learning anytime, anywhere, whenever. There's no boundaries for it. And so in going through my Twitter feed, Dr. Enilda popped up and the information, and I saw her do the TEDx talk, and I did more research and looked at what she was doing. And I wanted to have her on the show to talk about e-learning and her experience, to shed more light on this topic. So for those who will be watching in the future on YouTube and who will be listening on iTunes and SoundCloud, Dr. Enilda, will you please introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me in the show. Yes, I'm an assistant professor of education at the University of Tampa. I teach in the instructional design and technology program, and I primarily teach to master's level students who want to be practitioners of instructional design. Thank you.
You're welcome. So as you've mentioned, you are an assistant professor. What is your specific area of research and what drew you to e-learning?
Yes, so I focus my research primarily on the design and development and implementation of learning experiences within higher education and then also within training in the industry side of things. In the larger context, the big umbrella, I focus on factors that aid the learning process in digital media. So I have three subsections, again, within this big umbrella. The first one is the area of research related to design elements in interactive multimedia environments, such as simulations. And this area of research focuses on human-computer interaction design. Then I also do research on online social communities and specifically looking at informal learning. So right now I'm looking at lurking within social media environments. And then my last area of research is actually exploring the instructional design practice in online and blended instruction. So to address your second question on what draws me to online and blended learning, I think it has a lot to do with my personal experience as an online student during my graduate studies. I completed my master's degree in a fully online program, and then my doctoral degree was actually in synchronous online mode. And just understanding the process that occurred, that was really important to me. I'm also a faculty member and I teach instructional design students. So I want to be able to research and teach them about what is effective, what is engaging, what is efficient when it comes to online and blended learning. And last, I'm currently teaching in an institution that is just starting to consider online instruction. We have been practicing blended learning for a few years. And when I do research, I'm able to take the research and put it into practice. So those are the reasons why I'm drawn into online and blended learning.
And it's cool that you mentioned lurking and informal learning with online communities. I actually wrote my dissertation on teachers using a Twitter-supported personal learning network for professional development. And part of that included lurkers. And I had people who, in my own study, were lurkers, where so they would just sit there and they report, oh, I found this great information, but they didn't actually, engage people on Twitter for professional development. So that was real cool. And what I enjoy personally, and what I love about e-learning the most, is the sort of depth of learning as well as the communal experiences. Because when you go to a face-to-face graduate program, let's just start there. Your learning is with people who live in your vicinity. So these people may teach at your school or a neighboring school, and all you're getting is those sort of experiences. But an online program, your classmates could be anywhere in the United States and around the world. And so when you are talking about and having these discussions, you're getting perspectives from different states, from different types of schools, from different areas, that to me further enrich the experience, because it's not sort of an isolated one. It is one that has one or more of a larger scale.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I think that there is a sociocultural aspect to it, and it enriches the experience, definitely. Mm-hmm.
So as we look at different models, school missions, and various delivery instruction, where does online learning come into play? And how does teaching and learning change when the classroom can be accessed from any internet-connected device?
Mm-hmm. Those are really good questions. For me, online learning, it provides possibilities for individuals who have limited access to educational opportunities and who are unable to attend, the traditional brick and mortar institution. So it can be somebody who has a non-traditional working schedule, and they can't fit the regular school hours into their schedule. It can be somebody who has a disability and is unable to travel to and from a traditional classroom location, or they, as you mentioned, have geographical limitations. So they are somewhere where they can't travel to the institution that they want to go to. And actually, I've been reading some research about individuals who may live in remote locations and live really far away, again, unable to travel to a physical location. So online learning, online education provides those access to those educational opportunities. And ideally, in an ideal situation, the level of instruction will be just as effective and just as efficient as it is in a face-to-face format. And efficient is extremely important, because the instruction has to be well organized, it has to be accessible to the learners, and it has to include social aspects that they cannot be facilitated just as you can in a face-to-face setting. Mm-hmm. And those are the things that I think also change when you have access to education in an online environment. When you talk about what changes, and I think it depends on the type of instruction that you have. If you have an asynchronous online course versus a synchronous online course. If we're talking about an asynchronous online course, I think that level of efficiency comes, it has to be one of the highest priority for the instructor. So let's say, for example, I am an online student and I'm able to log into my course at 11 o'clock at night. I don't want to have to wonder where do I start? Where is my assignment? How do I submit it? Because unlike my classmate that, is able to attend the face-to-face version, I can't just simply raise my hand and ask the instructor. I have to write an email to my instructor, wait for a response, and that already delays my learning experience because I might not be able to log in the next day until 11 o'clock. Mm-hmm. So I think that is one aspect. The level of efficiency has to be very high. Other aspects that I think are extremely important is elements of motivations that have to be embedded into the instruction. So as an instructor or someone that's designing the instruction, you have to think about active participation. And we often think about online learning about being like having a learning management system, and then we have a repository of our PowerPoints there, and here goes the learners to this, self-guided learning experience. But it really is more than just that. It's about thinking about what kind of hands-on practice am I going to give the learners? Is there going to be any kind of role-playing activity? So again, active participation. Something that changes, and I know it's not often talked about, but is the use of humor. In a face-to-face classroom, we use humor, and there are so many contexts and cues that you can, keep in mind when you have humor. But in an online environment, some of that context is gone because you might be facilitating your communication via text. So humor is important, but it has to be used with caution. Relevance is key. And I know that some of these things are just as equally important to face-to-face, but in an online environment, sometimes we forget about this thing. So linking to the prior experience of the learner, or making sure that they know how it is going to be useful for them, is extremely important, because again, it keeps them motivated, it keeps them engaged. And at the very beginning, of course, we have to let the learners know about the objectives of the instructions, what it is that they're going to be able to get out of it. And feedback, you have to be able to engage with the learner and let them know that what are they doing correctly, what they need to modify. And something that can actually help that social aspect of interaction online is video feedback. I've seen a lot of recent research related to the benefits and usefulness of video feedback in online learning. Three aspects that I think I want to make sure I mention relate to the social presence that is often overlooked when it comes to online education. And something that is important is to create a community, or a community is a difficult term because I think we often struggle with how to define community, but creating a community of learner within a course. And you do that by, making sure individuals have an idea of who they're interacting with, the instructors and their classmates. And something really simple that you can do to create that community and that personal communication is the use of photos and introductions about who you are in an online environment. Can give an idea of, hey, I have a classmate, they live in Utah and they like to hike. So it gives you a sense of, belonging to a group of individuals. And then the two things that also help with the social presence is providing good communication that is timely and frequent with your learners. I have taken online courses and, I've sat there waiting for an email from my instructor, and that's really important. So equally important is being responsive to the student needs, what it is that they want out of the course, what they're hoping to get out of it, and how they plan to apply it. It, again, creates that social presence in an online course. So I think that those are all factors that are, again, equally important in a face-to-face environment, but often overlooked. And we think them as change, but they're often overlooked in online environments.
Mm-hmm. So I want to throw this out there to you, because we sort of, we did talk about this before we started recording, but the type of students that would be successful in an online learning program. I understand that, as you mentioned earlier, you could live in a rural area and the next university could be an hour away. And you're like, well, look, I work full time, I can't get to that hour. It could be a situation where, look, you teach full time and you have 3 kids at home, and you're like, I have to go online. Mm-hmm. But for whatever reason that sort of sparks your interest in online learning, it isn't for everyone. And so, if you will, get into sort of what is the ideal student for the online environment, and what does it take from that learner in order for them to be successful?
Yes, as a learner, in order to be successful, a learner has to be a very highly organized individual. And my recommendation would actually be to schedule your online time just as you schedule your online classes. So for example, I was teaching project management this summer, and my students were in class with me on Tuesdays from 6 to 10. So if you are taking the same exact class in a fully online environment, schedule your time to say from 6 to 10 on Tuesday is as if I'm in the classroom. Of course, you do that in the times that are convenient for you. But if you schedule it, it helps you, be successful at staying on top of your assignments, and staying on top of whatever it is that you have to do for your online course. Because just as we were talking, there were different types of online formats. So you may be in a class where you don't have a specific deadlines, and it's easy to procrastinate and say, well, I'll do that later, or I have until, the end of the semester, or whenever it is to turn in my assignments. So, and those things can accumulate, and it's difficult. It's not going to be the same kind of learning experience if you're rushing to complete an assignment versus scheduling and really going over the content and the materials, reflecting on your assignments and turning them in. It's going to be a completely different learning experience. So I think that if you are going to be a student in an online format, you have to have, self-determination. You have to be organized, and you have to be willing to, take on the responsibility. So it sounds easy for the instructor or perhaps the students to say, oh, I'm just going to take an online course, or I'm just going to create an online course. But there is actually a significant amount of responsibilities in both ends, and high level of organization for both the instructor and the student to be successful at teaching or being successful at having a good learning experience.
Well, you definitely, as a student, you can't hide in an online environment. You have to turn in the work. So versus a corporate environment where their learning and development department may use iSpring, for example. In education, K through 12 or higher ed, a lot of schools opt for a learning management system, Canvas, Schoology, Blackboard. What is the learning curve for teachers on how to learn how to design and deliver instruction via a learning management system? And what are some of the skills does it take to become an effective instructional designer of online learning?
Well, for the learning management system, it probably takes a significant amount of time to become familiar with the options that you have within the environment. So one of the things that I like to do is that I create a beta testing course. And in that beta testing course, I test all the tools that are available within a learning management system. So that way, well, perhaps I have the option of including a discussion board, and this is what the discussion board can be like. So, maybe it releases the questions and it doesn't let the students see the responses until they have posted their own. So, when you create a course, you get an opportunity to see what are the different options that you may have or activities that you can create within it, within a learning management system. And again, it varies between the different kinds of learning management systems that are out there. I'm particularly familiar with Blackboard. So That's what I do. I'm constantly looking whenever there's an update, what it is that the update provides and what are the tools that are available within the learning management system. So I say take time to sit down and look at, again, options that are available within the LMS. The second part of the question, when you ask about, what it is that you need to be the skills that you need to have in order to be effective as an instructional designer or designing online learning. I think that the most important thing is the content knowledge. Because once you are an instructor that has the knowledge, you are able to make a determination of what are the best strategies for the learner to acquire that knowledge. So, you're going to understand that, again, self-learning, self-study is not the same thing as online learning. You're going to think about content-appropriate instructional strategies. And because it's in an online format, you're going to think about content-appropriate learning strategies in a technology-mediated environment, right? So having that content knowledge is key and essential. The other thing that is an important skill that we often fail at when it comes to online instruction is the online presence. Making sure that the learners don't have those feelings of isolation because they're in an online environment. So knowing how to deepen the conversation, whether it is a discussion board or any kind of other social interaction that is happening within the online course. So again, facilitating the discussion between the individuals or groups of individuals, or facilitating the discussion as the instructor with the students in the course. So that online social presence is key. You also have to have very effective communication skills. So that little example that I provided before, in which I talked about, being a student that logs in at 11 o'clock in the evening, and, you read the instructions and you're wondering, well, does this mean this or does this mean that? Where do I go from here? So having effective communication skills can avoid frustrations for your students, and to make sure that everybody understands, what it is that you're giving them to do. At our institution, we actually have a peer review process, an internal peer review process, in which our instructional technologist goes over our courses, and then they give you like a little checklist and say, well, I didn't really understand when you wrote this. Just like you were talking about journal articles and you get those revisions, it's the exact same process. So again, going back to the question, effective communication skills. And then something else is just the ability to manage your online students. And that's, making sure you're staying on top of your grading, giving timely feedback, responding back to emails, those sort of duties that can be very challenging depending on how many students you have. I think one recommendation I would give, if anybody is wanting to put into practice instructional design for online instruction, is to look at Quality Matters. So go online and go into Quality Matters. And there you can get certified and, have all that knowledge. But if you don't want to, pay for the certification, you can create an account and download the Quality Matters rubric. And that, at the very least, can serve as a guide to, here are the things that your online course has to have in order to have a, good quality rating. So I think that that's an easy way to go about the process.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you for dropping that gem. Now that quality matter certification, the cost of that is no joke.
Yeah.
I've looked at it myself because I got Cool certified, which is a teaching for online certification offered out of RCU via Mississippi State University. And it was to prepare us to design courses, but also design courses via Canvas.
Mm-hmm.
And so it cost me $135. And then I was like, well, I can't stop there. I have to keep learning and learning and learning. And let me look at Quality Matters. And I looked at it, woo!
Yes, it is pricey. That's why, at the very least, I recommend getting the rubrics.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we do in the class that I teach in online and distance learning. Download the rubrics, and it serves as a guide. Yes, Quality Matters is expensive, but if that's something that an organization is considering, fully going into online and distance education, it might be something that they could potentially look on to support their instructional designers. So
I'm had to look at it again. But so now I want to throw this out there to you, because the bulk of people who go through the university system and who are prepared to teach, they go in to that route, go in as the standard professor, where I have my PowerPoints and I'm going to lecture from that bad boy, and you get it or you don't. But that's just considered the standard. But we have more and more universities, as well as K through 12, because they're still being taught the same way through their K through 12 educator programs. But they were taught to teach a certain way, and more, whether it's K through 12 or higher ed, they are moving online. Mm-hmm. How do you, I guess, for that teacher at either level, who this is all they know is the traditional way of teaching, what has been going on for, hundreds of years, and now that university comes to them, that high school administrator comes to them and says, we want you to teach one class online. And now they're like, what? What do you mean? Because they don't know anything about it. What do you say to them, and how, one, I guess, to alleviate their concerns, and secondly, to start preparing them to how they should start to prepare themselves to actually teach online?
I probably say, look to see if what kind of resources are being provided to you. Do you get to choose how you teach online, or where do you put your content? One of the things that we have, at least most institutions of higher education and even K-12, is, well, here's a learning management system that you can use. Here's an LMS that you can use. So I would say, start working with the resources that you have, and start working on becoming familiar with online education. So reaching out to potential professional organizations may be a good way to do that. The Online Learning Consortium would be a good organization to start reading at the materials that they offer online, resources that are free, and potentially ask your institution if they're willing to invest on you acquiring additional knowledge, maybe going to a conference or going to doing some of the professional development seminars that they offer online. So I know at our institution, we have our instructional technologists do some of the 1-week professional development training that the Online Learning Consortium offers. So there's no travel course, but one, it gives an individual an opportunity to experience online learning if they have never experienced it as a student. And two, it gives them additional knowledge. So I would say that if you're never being taught online, or you have never taken a class online and your institution is asking you to teach online, that will be a good way to get started. Maybe do any kind of free professional development, but also ask if there are any resources that can help you gain additional knowledge. And then use the resources that you have. If you have a learning management system, start by becoming familiar with it. I always say start at your learning objectives, because I feel that you look at your learning objectives, then you look at the instructional strategy, and then within the instructional strategy, then you consider how you can facilitate that strategy using any technology mediated tool that you may have, right? So one example that I can think of, like, let's say you're teaching nurses or individuals who want to become nurses. And your learning objective is to, for them to know after they finish the instruction, how to assess the pain level of a patient. So if you're teaching online, what you would do is you provide resources, information on, pain management, different interview strategies for pain management. And you want to be able to perhaps integrate some technology into it. You can look to see if there's any kind of simulation that allows the learner to have that pain management interview in a simulated environment, right? So again, it goes back to having your objective, having your learning strategy, and thinking of how you're going to potentially use technology-mediated activity to facilitate the learner acquiring the knowledge for the objective, if that makes sense.
So to go with that, I want to ask you to please walk me through how educators can use multimedia, computer-based programs, as well as social media, actually to create a more dynamic learning experience.
So I think we touched and talked about having that content knowledge before, how it was important for someone who's going to facilitate an online course to have that content knowledge, because they would know what are the best strategies to acquire that knowledge. So the important thing to know is to know how to adequately blend that content, the pedagogy, and then the technology. How to fuse these three things together. I think that often the struggle is that someone who is very good in their content knowledge, but they may not know that technology piece. Or we have individuals who are huge advocates of technology, but they don't know the content. So having to fuse those three things is integral, so that you create a dynamic learning experience. And again, I think it goes back to having key learning objectives and thinking of your strategy of how to acquire that, how to achieve that learning objective. And thinking about different types of, perhaps it is a multimedia related activity that the learner is going to engage in. Perhaps there is a social activity. They have to go on Twitter and interact with experts on whatever topic in order to gain the knowledge. So as an instructional designer, I always go back to the learning objective and the strategy that's going to facilitate the learner reaching that objective.
Excellent, excellent. Love the conversation today. You have been very nice at really bringing this home, because I want people to, one, become not only more aware of online learning, but they got to embrace it. It's not going anywhere. And as universities or even high schools start to look at costs, and they say, well, I can bring in higher ed, I could bring in more students if I had some online programs, which I know that might not, some purists, I guess, may go, well, that's not the purpose of higher ed. But if you're a university and you say, well, I can only admit so many people in this face-to-face master's program. However, if I put that master's program online, I can admit a whole lot more students. And because it's online, I can hire adjuncts from all over the country to teach those courses as well. So it can be a win-win. So before we go, where do you see, I guess, online learning going? And what do you say to those individuals who believe online education is a fad and doesn't provide the same quality of an education, of learning, than face-to-face?
Well, on the first part of the question, where do I see online learning going? I agree very much with you. I'm an educator at heart. I'm a scholar, but I was a business major in my undergrad. So I understand that, fortunately and unfortunately, money matters. And, institutions of higher education, they see the value in online education, and, to administrators that have to worry about finances, it's something that definitely they keep in mind. But I also see that the number of individuals who want access to education is increasing. The number of students that are graduating and going on to college and university is increasing. And I don't know other institutions, but at least in our institutions, we have two seasons. We have the academic year, and then we have construction season, because we don't have enough classroom space for the number of students that are coming to our institution. So, it's not only financially savvy for institutions of higher education and perhaps K-12, but it's also a matter of having enough spaces for the students that are, wanting to continue their studies. So I think that online education is going to continue to grow and expand. Another thing that I see in the future of online education is that, and this is kind of based on what I've been reading and seeing at different conferences, is that individuals, whether it's instructional designers, faculty members, researchers, and starting to notice the value of blended learning. So a certain amount of face-to-face instruction, or at least synchronous online instruction. So I think that perhaps we're going to start seeing some different patterns on types of online education, where there could be more synchronous online or face-to-face components to it. And for individuals who say that online education is just, not producing the same quality. I'm all about the research. So I would say that there are many discussions happening about online education, and there's journals that are written entirely about online education. And in those journals, the conversation is past. Online education does not deliver or provide the same quality as face-to-face. Online education is happening right now. Also, the reality is that there are face-to-face courses that are not quality and, may not be delivering also. So just like it happens in face-to-face, it also happens in an online environment. So I say at the end, as an educator and scholar, I say, seek additional education, seek more knowledge on the topic. There are two journals that I would like to mention, and they're open access: the International Review of Research in Open and Distributed Learning, and the Online Learning Journal, which is sponsored by the Online Learning Consortium. So just seek additional knowledge in the topic. We are past the conversation of face-to-face versus online. Online education is happening today.
Excellent. I'm all in on digital, all in on online learning, which is why I'm learning myself now, because that's where, my job has been teaching teachers how to blend technology in their classrooms, create these blended learning environments, as well as using our LMS to create whole courses to be a part of blending what they do face to face. And it's been difficult for a lot of teachers to see the benefit of actually designing that course in an LMS. And I try to get them like, look, this thing can move on its own, and you can have kids who are absent stay on top of work. If you're absent, you can have students stay on top of work, not to mention putting in resources for your students to where they have access to information 24/7. They're not going to lose a handout because the handout is there on your online class. If you, for example, one of my teachers is a great lecturer. And when he and I started working together, I said, let's get you using Edu Creation and explain everything. And so he was able to work out problems, and kids see the problem being worked out. They hear his voice. The instruction is delivered in the same way he delivers it. And now that's in Schoology. They have him. Even when he's not there, they have him. Mm-hmm. And, when I try to sell teachers on this, like, I know it's a lot of work up front. I'm not going to lie to you.
That's what I was going to say. I think that the challenge of the work up front can be difficult to acknowledge, because you don't have, you can't, but it's going to be even more challenging if you try to, build the plane as you're flying it. It's easier to just put all the work up front, and that is sometimes the challenging part to accept.
Yes. Because I would say more than other groups, educators are creatures of habit. And when you've been teaching this class, this course, this subject for many years, you already have all your PowerPoints or handouts or whatever. You got that stuff already stacked. Now just a middle of, let me do a little tweak and make copies. That's it. I'm ready to go. Versus that online, especially if that's your first year, you're building from scratch. And it's going to take time. I tell them, hey, I don't lie. Look, it's going to take a lot of time. But once it's done, the following year, you're just tweaking. You're adding stuff. You're subtracting what didn't work. And to me, it's more helpful because you're not bringing stuff home. So if a kid writes you something in a Google Doc, you can give feedback within a Google Doc instead of you taking 120 papers home. You know what I'm saying? So I try to give them the win-win on that because it's a whole new, brave new world. So I'm hoping that teachers take hold to it and not only accept that it's here, but embrace it and see where they actually fit in. Yeah. So thank you, Dr. Enilda, for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I truly enjoy this topic. I enjoy talking to others about it. And I really enjoy the design process. Unlike, others who might see it as a huge investment upfront, it to me is a creative process when you're thinking about how you're going to make this work for your learners. So for me, it's something that I truly enjoy.
Awesome. Awesome. People, you know how I do this. The video is going up on YouTube. I need you to subscribe, leave your comments. The podcast will be going up on iTunes and SoundCloud. I need you to follow, subscribe, leave your comments, because your boy is trying to get Oprah on the show. And I want her to know that I'm doing big things around here. As always, people, invest in you, EDU. Peace.